Thaddeus Kincaid woke to the sound of something heavy shifting on his porch, and when he opened the door with the first pale light of dawn spilling across his homestead, he found an orc girl kneeling in the dirt with her forehead pressed to the weathered wood, her voice hoarse as she whispered, "Please, just let me stay and serve you." He stood there in his undershirt and work trousers, one suspender hanging loose, staring down at the creature who had somehow found his farm in the middle of nowhere. She was young, maybe 20 at most, with skin the color of summer moss and small tusks that barely protruded past her lower lip. Her pointed ears were pierced with simple iron rings, and her dark hair hung in a thick braid down her back. She wore leather armor that had seen better days, pieces missing from the shoulder and a long tear across the side that showed bruised ribs beneath. "What are you doing here?" Thaddeus asked, his hand still gripping the door frame. He had been a soldier once, before he bought this land with his discharge pay and tried to build something quiet. He knew orcs. He had fought them in the border wars 5 years ago, though he had never wanted to. Most of them had been conscripts like him, caught up in the feuding of nobles who cared nothing for the people dying in their names. The orc girl lifted her head slightly, just enough that he could see her face. She had a strong jaw and high cheekbones, and her eyes were the color of honey in sunlight. One of those eyes was swollen nearly shut, purple and black with bruising. "I have nowhere else to go," she said. "My clan cast me out. I thought if I could find a human who might show mercy, I could earn my place. I will work. I will do anything. I just need shelter." Thaddeus felt something twist in his chest. He should send her away. The nearest town was 10 miles south, and if anyone there found out he was harboring an orc, they would burn his farm and probably hang him for good measure. Humans and orcs did not mix, not in this part of the world. The peace treaty was only 3 years old, and the wounds were still fresh on both sides. But she was hurt, and she was alone, and he had seen enough suffering in his life to know what it looked like. "Get up," he said, and when she flinched, he softened his tone. "Come inside. Let me see those injuries." She rose slowly, unsteadily, and he could see now that she was favoring her left leg. She was tall, taller than him by a few inches, with broad shoulders and a build that spoke of strength even in her current state. She followed him into the small cabin, moving carefully as though afraid he might change his mind. The interior was simple but clean. A wooden table with 2 chairs, a stove in the corner, a bed against the far wall, and shelves lined with books he had collected over the years. She stood just inside the doorway, her eyes taking in everything with a mixture of wonder and wariness. "Sit," Thaddeus said, gesturing to one of the chairs. He went to the basin and pumped some water, then grabbed a clean cloth from his trunk. When he turned back, she was sitting rigidly, her hands folded in her lap. He approached carefully and knelt beside her, examining the gash on her ribs. "This needs to be cleaned. It is going to hurt." She nodded once, her jaw set. He pressed the damp cloth to the wound, and she hissed through her teeth but did not pull away. The cut was deep but not fatal, though it would leave a scar. He worked methodically, cleaning the dirt and dried blood away, then moved to the bruises on her face. "What is your name?" he asked as he dabbed at the swelling around her eye. "Lira Drakar," she said. Her voice was steadier now, though he could hear the exhaustion beneath it. "Thaddeus Kincaid," he replied. "Why did your clan cast you out?" She was quiet for a long moment, and he thought she might not answer. Then she said, "I refused to raid a human settlement. The elders said it was necessary, that we needed the supplies for winter, but the settlement was just families, children. I told them I would not do it, so they beat me and left me at the border with nothing." Thaddeus sat back on his heels, studying her face. Orcs valued strength above all else, or so the stories went. To defy the elders would take courage, especially for something like mercy. You gave up everything for people you do not even know. I gave up nothing, she said quietly. If my clan values cruelty, then they are not worth keeping. He stood and went to the stove, stoking the fire and putting a pot of water on to boil. I have porridge and some dried meat. You must be hungry. She watched him move around the small space, her expression unreadable. Why are you helping me? Because you need help, he said simply. He did not mention the war or the faces he still saw sometimes when he closed his eyes. He did not mention the orc soldier who had spared him once, pulling him from the mud after a skirmish and dragging him behind a tree instead of finishing him off. He had never known why, and he had never forgotten. They ate in silence, and when she finished, she set the bowl down and looked at him with those honey-colored eyes. I meant what I said. I will work for you. I am strong. I can plow fields, chop wood, whatever you need. You are hurt, Thaddeus pointed out. You need rest first. I do not need charity, she said, and there was pride in her voice now, sharp and defensive. I will earn my place. He sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. Fine. You can stay in the barn until you heal. There is a loft with some hay. It is not much, but it is dry. When you are better, we will figure out what comes next. She nodded, and he could see the relief wash over her face, though she tried to hide it. He led her outside to the barn, a sturdy structure he had built himself over the course of a summer. The loft was accessed by a ladder, and he climbed up first to make sure it was clear, then helped her up. Her movements were slow and pained, but she did not complain. There are blankets in the corner, he said. If you need anything, the house is right there. Thank you, she said, and the words sounded like they cost her something. He left her there and went back to the house, but he did not sleep. Instead, he sat at the table and wondered what he had just done. The days that followed fell into a cautious rhythm. Lira kept to herself at first, staying in the barn and emerging only to help with the work. She was as strong as she had claimed, able to carry loads that would have taken him 2 trips, and she worked with a fierce determination that bordered on desperation. He tried to tell her to take it easy, that her ribs needed time to heal, but she ignored him. By the end of the first week, the swelling in her face had gone down, and he could see her features more clearly. She was striking in a way he had not expected, with a face that was both fierce and gentle, depending on the angle of the light. She caught him staring once, and he looked away quickly, feeling heat rise to his cheeks. You do not have to watch me all the time, she said, leaning on the handle of the axe she had been using to split wood. I am not going to steal from you. I was not thinking that, he said, which was true. He had been thinking about how the morning sun caught in her dark hair, and how her tusks gave her smile a crooked charm when she finally allowed herself to show one. She tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made him shift his weight. What were you thinking then? That you are a good worker, he said, which was also true if not the whole truth. She snorted, a sound that was almost a laugh, and went back to splitting wood. They began to talk more as the days passed. She told him about her clan, about growing up in the northern mountains where the winters were brutal and the summers short. She talked about her mother, who had been a healer, and her father, who had died in the border wars. She did not say which side had killed him, and Thaddeus did not ask. He told her about his own past, about the farm he had grown up on before his father died and his mother remarried. He told her about joining the army because he had no other options, and about the years he had spent learning to kill people he had no quarrel with. He told her about buying this land because he wanted to be far away from everything, where he could work with his hands and build something that was his. You regret it? She asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the air was cool against their skin. "Regret what?" he asked. "Leaving the world behind," she said. "Being alone out here." He considered the question. "Sometimes, but I think I needed it. After everything, I just wanted quiet." She nodded slowly. "I understand that." They sat in companionable silence, and Thaddeus found himself noticing the way the fading light played across her green skin, turning it a deeper shade of jade. He had stopped thinking of her as an orc somewhere along the way. She was just Lira now, the woman who laughed at his bad jokes and who could outwork him on the farm without breaking a sweat. It was dangerous, this feeling that was growing in his chest. He tried to ignore it, tried to tell himself that it was just gratitude or loneliness, but he knew better. He was falling for her, slowly and inevitably, like a stone sinking into deep water. He did not know if she felt the same. She was careful around him, always maintaining a respectful distance, always deferring to him as though he were her employer rather than something more. It frustrated him, but he did not know how to bridge the gap without risking the fragile peace they had built. The turning point came in the 4th week of her stay. Thaddeus had gone into town to sell some of the vegetables from his garden, and he returned to find Lira standing in the yard with an axe in her hands, facing down 3 men on horseback. They were rough-looking, with the kind of hard eyes that spoke of violence as a way of life. Bandits, most likely, or deserters from one of the militias that still roamed the border regions. "Well, well," one of them said, a lean man with a scar across his cheek. "Looks like the farmer has himself a pet orc. How much you want for her?" Thaddeus felt his blood go cold. He dismounted slowly, keeping his movements calm and deliberate. "She is not for sale, and you are on my land. I suggest you leave." The man laughed, a harsh and ugly sound. "You hear that, boys? He thinks he can tell us what to do." He swung down from his horse, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "Maybe we will just take her, and maybe we will take whatever else we find here while we are at it." Lira shifted her grip on the axe, her stance widening. "You can try," she said, and her voice was low and dangerous. The man lunged, and everything happened fast. Lira moved like water, sidestepping his swing and bringing the axe down in a brutal arc that caught him in the shoulder. He screamed and fell, clutching at the wound. The other 2 hesitated, and that was all the opening Thaddeus needed. He drew the old cavalry saber he kept strapped to his saddle and moved in, his body remembering the training even after all these years. The fight was short and brutal. One of the bandits fled, his courage breaking, and the other went down with a slash across his arm. Thaddeus stood over the wounded man, his blade leveled at his throat. "Leave," he said, his voice shaking with adrenaline. "And if I ever see you on my land again, I will not be so generous." The man scrambled to his feet and ran, dragging his injured companion with him. They mounted their horses and rode off, leaving only blood in the dirt behind them. Thaddeus turned to Lira, who was breathing hard, her knuckles white around the handle of the axe. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, then dropped the axe and sank to her knees, her hands trembling. "I thought they were going to kill you." He knelt beside her, his own hands shaking as he reached out to touch her shoulder. "They did not. We are safe." She looked up at him, and he saw something raw and unguarded in her eyes. "I cannot lose this," she said, her voice breaking. "I cannot lose you. This place, this life you have given me, it is the first time I have felt like I belong somewhere. Please, just let me stay. I will do anything." The words echoed what she had said that first morning, but they carried a different weight now. He realized, looking at her, that she was not just asking for shelter. She was asking for something more, something neither of them had dared to name. "Lira," he said softly, and his hand moved from her shoulder to cup her face, his thumb brushing against the curve of her tusk. You do not have to beg, you belong here, with me if you want to. Her breath caught and she leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. I do not understand this, she whispered. You are human, I am orc, this is not supposed to happen. I know, he said, but it has. And I do not want to fight it anymore. She opened her eyes, and he saw the same longing there that he felt in his own chest. What if the world does not accept it? Then the world can go to hell, he said, and he meant it. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers, and they stayed like that for a long moment, breathing each other in. When they finally kissed, it was tentative and sweet, a question and an answer all at once. Her tusks pressed gently against his lips, unfamiliar but not unwelcome. She tasted like the earth and the wind, like home. They pulled apart slowly, and he saw a smile on her face, genuine and unguarded. I have wanted to do that for a while, she admitted. So have I, he said, and he laughed, the tension draining out of him. I just did not know how to tell you. She stood and pulled him to his feet, her strength effortless. You are terrible at hiding your feelings, Thaddeus Kincaid. I have seen the way you look at me. And how is that? He asked, though he thought he knew the answer. Like I am something precious, she said, and her voice was soft. Like I matter. You do, he said, more than you know. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Thaddeus's life. They worked the farm together, side by side, and at night they sat on the porch and talked until the stars came out. He learned the way she hummed when she was content, the way she crinkled her nose when she was thinking hard about something. She learned that he liked his coffee strong and his mornings quiet, that he had a scar on his back from a spear thrust that had nearly killed him. They did not hide what they were from each other. She told him about the loneliness she had felt in her clan, the sense that she had never quite fit in. He told her about the nightmares he still had sometimes, the ones where he was back in the war and could not tell friend from enemy. They held each other through the hard moments, and they celebrated the small joys. The first time she baked bread that did not turn out like a brick, he ate 3 slices and told her it was the best thing he had ever tasted. The first time he managed to fix the broken plow without her help, she kissed him so hard he forgot his own name. But the outside world did not stay away forever. It was late autumn when the riders came, a group of men from the nearby town. They wore the colors of the local militia, and their leader was a man named Garrett, who owned the largest farm in the area. Thaddeus had dealt with him a few times, and he had never liked him. Garrett was the kind of man who saw the world in black and white, and who believed that orcs were nothing more than animals. Kincaid, Garrett called as he rode up to the house. We heard you have been harboring an orc. That true? Thaddeus stepped out onto the porch, his hand resting casually on the railing. Lira was inside, but he knew she could hear every word. What business is it of yours? It is everyone's business when you are breaking the law, Garrett said. The treaty says orcs are allowed in human lands only if they are registered and monitored. You have not registered her, have you? Thaddeus felt his jaw tighten. She is not a criminal. She is just trying to live her life. She is an orc, Garrett said, as though that explained everything. And you are putting all of us at risk by keeping her here. What if her clan comes looking for her? What if she turns on you? She would never do that, Thaddeus said, his voice hard. And her clan cast her out. She has no one but me. Garrett leaned forward in his saddle, his eyes cold. Then she should move on. There are orc settlements in the north. She can go there. She is staying here, Thaddeus said. And if you have a problem with that, you can take it up with me. Garrett's expression darkened. You are making a mistake, Kincaid. People are already talking. If you do not get rid of her, we will have to take action. Then take it, Thaddeus said, his hand moving to the saber at his side. But you will find I am not as easy to push around as you think. Garrett stared at him for a long moment, then turned his horse and rode off, his men following. Thaddeus watched them go, his heart pounding. When he turned, Lira was standing in the doorway, her face pale. "You should not have done that," she said. "They will come back, and they will not be alone." "I do not care," Thaddeus said. "I am not giving you up." She crossed the distance between them and took his hands in hers. "Thaddeus, I do not want you to lose everything because of me. Maybe I should leave. Maybe it would be better." "Better for who?" he demanded. "Not for me, not for you. Lira, I love you. Do you understand that? I love you, and I am not letting you go." She stared at him, her eyes wide. "You love me?" "Yes," he said. "I have loved you for weeks now. Maybe since the day you showed up on my porch and asked to stay. I do not know when it started, but I know it is real." Tears welled in her eyes, and she pulled him into a fierce embrace. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have been so afraid to say it. I thought you would think I was foolish." "Never," he said, holding her tightly. "You are the bravest person I know." They stood like that for a long time, and when they finally pulled apart, there was a determination in her eyes that he recognized. "Then we fight," she said. "We do not run, we fight for this." "Together," he agreed. The militia returned 3 days later, a dozen men strong. Thaddeus and Lira were ready. They had barricaded the house and stocked it with supplies. Thaddeus had his saber and an old crossbow, and Lira had her axe and a determination that burned like fire. Garrett rode at the front of the group, his face set in grim lines. "This is your last chance, Kincaid. Send the orc out and we will leave you alone." "No," Thaddeus called from the window. "You are going to have to come in here and take her, and I promise you it will cost you." Garrett raised his hand, and the men began to advance. Thaddeus loosed a bolt from the crossbow, and it took one of the men in the leg. He went down with a scream, and the others hesitated. "Next one goes through someone's chest," Thaddeus shouted. "I fought in the border wars. I know how to kill. Do not test me." The men looked at each other, uncertainty rippling through the group. Garrett cursed and spurred his horse forward, but before he could get far, another voice rang out across the field. "That is enough." Everyone turned. An old man was riding up the path, his horse moving at a steady trot. He wore the robes of a magistrate, and his face was lined with age and wisdom. Thaddeus recognized him as Judge Aldrich, a man who had served the region for decades and who was known for his fairness. "What is the meaning of this?" Aldrich demanded as he reached the group. "Garrett, what are you doing?" "We are enforcing the law," Garrett said. "Kincaid is harboring an unregistered orc." "And you thought the appropriate response was to storm his home with armed men," Aldrich said, his voice dry. "That is not how the law works, Garrett. That is how mobs work." Garrett flushed but held his ground. "The law is clear." "The law is also clear that orcs are entitled to register if they wish to live in human lands," Aldrich said. He turned to Thaddeus. "Why has your companion not registered, Kincaid?" Thaddeus opened the door and stepped out, Lira at his side. "Because I did not know she needed to," he said, "and because I was afraid of what would happen if people found out she was here." Aldrich studied them both, his gaze sharp. "I see. And what are your intentions, Miss Drakar?" Lira lifted her chin, her voice steady. "I want to stay here. This is my home now. Thaddeus is my home. I will register, I will follow the law, but I will not leave." Aldrich nodded slowly. "And you, Kincaid, what do you intend?" Thaddeus reached out and took Lira's hand, their fingers intertwining. "I intend to marry her if she will have me. And I intend to build a life with her here on this land, if the law allows it," Garrett sputtered. "You cannot be serious. A human and an orc. It is unnatural." "It is unusual," Aldrich corrected. "But it is not illegal. The treaty does not forbid inter-species marriage. It simply does not address it." He looked at Thaddeus and Lira, and a faint smile touched his lips. "I will register Miss Drakar myself, and if you two wish to marry, I will perform the ceremony. But be warned, it will not be easy. People will talk. Some will be cruel. We know, Lira said. But we are willing to face it, together. Aldrich nodded. Then I will help you however I can. He turned to Garrett. As for you, take your men and go home. If I hear of any more harassment, I will have you arrested for disturbing the peace. Am I clear? Garrett glared but nodded. He turned his horse and rode off, his men following. The wounded man was helped onto a horse and they disappeared down the path. Aldrich dismounted and walked over to Thaddeus and Lira. You are both very brave, he said, or very foolish. I have not decided which. Maybe both, Thaddeus said with a faint smile. Aldrich chuckled. Perhaps. Come to town tomorrow and we will get the paperwork sorted, and then, if you still wish it, we will hold the ceremony. They were married a week later in the small chapel at the edge of town. Only a handful of people attended, mostly those who had known Thaddeus before the war and who were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Lira wore a simple dress that Thaddeus had bought for her, and he wore his best suit, the one he had not touched since his discharge. Judge Aldrich performed the ceremony, his voice steady and sure as he spoke the words that bound them together. When it came time for the vows, Thaddeus took Lira's hands in his and looked into her eyes. I promise to stand by you, he said, no matter what comes. I promise to love you, to protect you, and to build a life with you that is worth living. You are my home, Lira, and I am yours. Lira's voice was thick with emotion as she spoke. I promise to be your partner, your equal, and your love. I promise to work beside you, to fight beside you, and to never leave you. You gave me a place to belong, Thaddeus. You gave me everything. When Aldrich pronounced them married, Thaddeus kissed her, and the small crowd erupted in applause. It was not a grand wedding, but it was theirs, and that was all that mattered. They returned to the farm as husband and wife, and the days that followed were filled with hard work and quiet joy. They planted crops for the spring, repaired the barn, and began to build a small addition onto the house. At night, they lay in bed together, her head on his chest, and talked about the future. You think we will ever have children? Lira asked one night, her voice soft. Thaddeus stroked her hair, considering the question. I do not know if it is possible, human and orc. But if it is, I would like that. Would you? Yes, she said. I think I would. I want to build something that lasts, Thaddeus. I want to leave something good behind. We will, he promised. Together. The winter was harsh, but they weathered it together. When spring came, the first green shoots appeared in the fields, and Lira laughed with delight, running through the rows like a child. Thaddeus watched her, his heart full, and he knew that he had made the right choice. People in town slowly began to accept them. It was not easy, and there were still those who refused to speak to them, but others warmed over time. Judge Aldrich became a frequent visitor, bringing news from the outside world and checking in to make sure they were doing well. A few of the younger farmers began to ask Lira for advice on the best ways to work the soil, and she answered with patience and grace. By the time summer arrived, Thaddeus and Lira had become a fixture of the community, unusual but no longer shocking. They were simply the Kincaids, the couple who lived out on the edge of the frontier and who worked harder than anyone else. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, Lira leaned her head on Thaddeus's shoulder and sighed contentedly. I never thought I would have this, she said. I never thought I would be happy. Neither did I, Thaddeus admitted. But I am. Are you? More than I can say, she said, and she turned to kiss him, her lips warm and soft against his. They sat there as the stars came out, holding each other close, and Thaddeus thought about the morning he had opened his door to find her kneeling in the dirt, desperate and alone. He thought about how far they had come, how much they had built together. Thank you, he said softly. For what? Lira asked, her voice drowsy. For staying, he said. For choosing me, She smiled, her tusks glinting in the starlight. "I would choose you 1,000 times over, Thaddeus Kincaid. You are my heart." "And you are mine," he said. They stayed on the porch until the night grew cold, and then they went inside, hand in hand, to the home they had built together. It was a small life, a quiet life, but it was theirs, and it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The years would bring challenges, as all lives do. There would be droughts and storms, illness and loss. But through it all they would face it together. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and who had chosen love over fear. And in that choice, they had found not just happiness, but something rarer still. They had found peace. And so they lived, the human and the orc, in their little farm on the edge of the world, proving that love could bloom even in the most unlikely of places. And that home was not a place but a person, a choice made every day to stand together and build something beautiful from the ashes of the past.